Hey guys, tonight we drift back into the fog of the past, where a cold salt wind smacks your cheeks and the creak of wooden planks under your boots makes you instantly wish you'd stayed in bed. You're stepping off a stubby little boat into a Viking fjord, and even though you're trying to play it cool, your bones already ache just imagining the long night ahead. Picture narrow grey water, hemmed in by tall cliffs streaked with ice, and a ragtag village crouching by the shoreline, smoke spiralling up from turf-roofed huts. Everything here looks damp, tired, and vaguely fishy. And let's be honest, you probably won't last a day in this place, not with your soft pillows and indoor plumbing back home. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fun to see this little community stretch across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boat rocks against the dock and you lurch forward, knees knocking together in a way you're hoping no one notices. The first thing you feel is the wind. It cuts straight through your modern hoodie, because of course, you forgot that Vikings never invented fleece-lined polyester. Around you, a few villagers glance over, not quite impressed by your clumsy landing. They've been hauling nets since dawn. You look like someone who struggles to lift a grocery bag. The ground beneath your boots is slick with seawater and crushed shells. The dock creaks, its posts lashed with rope so frayed it looks like it might unravel if you so much as lean the wrong way. Beyond the dock you see racks, tall wooden frames hung with drying fish, their tails stiff and frozen in mid-flap like an eerie parade of salty ghosts. Historians still argue whether these racks were mostly for cod or herring, but either way, the smell slaps you harder than a poorly microwaved tuna melt. You try breathing through your mouth, but that just makes it worse. The air tastes like smoke, brine, and something sour that might be last week's stew tossed out behind the longhouse. You cough, which earns you another skeptical look from a woman carrying a bucket that's at least half her body weight. She's trudging across the muddy ground like it's nothing. Meanwhile, you're already considering a nap. The house is huddled together at the edge of the fjord. They aren't the picturesque Viking halls you've seen in TV dramas. These are squat, rough-sided structures, their turf roofs sprouting scraggly grass. Smoke seeps out through the gaps, curling up into the slate sky. A few chickens cluck miserably in the muck, and a goat eyes you as though it knows you'll never figure out how to milk it. Spoiler? You won't. As you shuffle toward the cluster of huts, a child runs past, barefoot, laughing like the wind isn't razor blade cold. You can't tell if that's resilience or early onset frostbite. The villagers don't exactly stop what they're doing to welcome you. Hospitality is more of a raid a monastery and then share type of thing here. Still, you're in their world now, and that means you've got to at least look busy. One man gestures at you to help drag in a small boat. You grab the rope, instantly feeling the rough hemp burn against your palms. Your city-soft hands are no match for this texture. It's like gripping a cheese grater dipped in seawater. By the time you've stumbled through 2 pulls, your shoulders ache. The villagers don't say anything, but you can practically hear their collective sigh. This one's not going to make it through winter. Funny detail, archaeologists actually found Viking combs carved from animal bone, which means even in this fish-reeking mudhole they still cared about grooming. You, however, already look like you've been through a hurricane, and it's only been 10 minutes. Somewhere in the background, a dog barks, and another growls. Maybe at you, maybe at the smell of you. Hard to say. A sudden gust of wind sends spray across your face, cold enough to sting. Your teeth chatter before you can stop them. The villagers, wrapped in wool cloaks and furs, barely flinch. Wool was their miracle material, naturally water-resistant and insulating. You look down at your damp hoodie again and realise you may as well have shown up wearing tissue paper. You step closer to the huts, mud sucking at your boots. One door swings open, and a swirl of warmer air drifts out, thick with the scent of smoke and boiled something. You duck inside, and your eyes sting immediately. The single-room house is dim, its walls a patchwork of turf and timber. A central hearth glows with embers, and the smoke clings low, making you cough all over again. The family inside barely looks up. They're sitting on benches, patching nets and scraping hides. You shuffle in like an uninvited intern at the world's least glamorous startup. Here's a quirky tidbit. Vikings often used moss as toilet paper. That's right, moss. You suddenly look around the hut wondering which pile of moss is for the fireplace and which pile is for, well, the other business. Historians still debate whether certain layers of moss found in middens, basically ancient garbage heaps, were used for hygiene or just stuffing for boots. Either way, you're praying you don't need to find out firsthand tonight. Your designated spot is in the corner, a lumpy straw mattress that looks and smells like it was borrowed from a barn floor. You gingerly lower yourself onto it, trying not to imagine all the fleas currently planning their welcome banquet. Every creak of the wooden frame and every hiss of the fire reminds you, this is not a hotel stay, this is survival, and you're already behind. The moment you step back outside, your eyes water, not from the smoke this time, but from the sheer assault on your senses. The smell here is unlike anything you've ever encountered in modern life, unless you once forgot a bag of shrimp in your car trunk during a July heatwave. All along the waterfront stand tall racks made from roughly hewn timber poles. Hanging from them are rows upon rows of cod, stretched and stiff, drying in the briny air like strange laundry left out for months. The fish sway ever so slightly in the breeze, tails twitching, as if some great invisible choir is preparing to sing in the key of rotten ocean. The villagers, of course, don't seem to notice. They march past, buckets swinging, hands busy with nets or knives. To them this is the smell of life, of trade, of survival. To you it's a gag reflex waiting to happen. You cover your nose with your sleeve, only to realise your sleeve already smells like smoke and seawater. Now you've just invented a new brand of eau de Viking. Ash, fish and despair. Don't worry, it's not coming to Sephora anytime soon. The smoke that drifts from the huts mixes with the salt air, layering the village in a haze that makes everything feel damp and close. Historians still argue whether Viking coastal villages smoked fish as heavily as they dried it, or if smoking was mostly a winter storage trick. Either way, what you're breathing now is a cocktail of both. Every inhale tastes like charred herring and wet driftwood. You shuffle closer to one of the drying racks. Up close, the fish look worse, hollow eyes staring blankly, their mouths frozen wide, as if they all collectively gasped their last breath mid-complaint about the weather. A raven swoops down and pecks at one, before flapping away when a child chases it off with a stick. The child laughs, you gag. Different priorities. The ground beneath the racks is slick with fish oil, a sort of shiny film that coats the mud. Your boots slide dangerously, and for a moment you picture yourself sprawled face first into a puddle of cod grease. Not exactly the heroic Viking saga you imagined. The villagers would probably nickname you Fish Face and never let you live it down. Nearby, a group of women sits on low stools, gutting smaller fish with quick, practiced flicks of their knives. The guts plop into wooden tubs, while the fillets are spread onto flat boards for salting. Salt is precious here. It doesn't just season, it saves lives. Without it, all that fish would spoil within days. Archaeologists have even found ancient salt production sites across Scandinavia, where brine was boiled down in clay pots. You, however, just notice how the salt stings your own cracked lips when the wind blows it up from the boards. Every taste is a reminder. You're dehydrating faster than these cod. Quirky detail? Fish oil wasn't just for eating. Vikings rubbed it into their hair and beards, giving them a shine you'd probably mistake for grease. Some even used it in lamps, so the whole village flickered under the soft glow of cod-powered nightlights. Imagine explaining that to your smart home devices. Yes, Alexa, dim the cod lamp to 50%. You pass a barrel where heads and spines are heaped, buzzing faintly with flies. The smell, if possible, is worse than the racks. A villager dumps another load into it, and you wonder aloud what happens to all that waste. He shrugs. Later it might be used for animal feed, or maybe just tossed into the sea to lure bigger catches. Recycling, Viking style. The smoke from the hearths never quite clears, clinging low to the village like a wool blanket you didn't want. Your eyes sting again, and you cough loudly, which earns you a chuckle from a fisherman nearby. He calls something in Old Norse, and though you don't understand the words, the tone is clear. Weak lungs, soft hands, not long for this world. Still, you try to keep moving. You peer into another hut where strips of fish hang above the fire, turning slowly golden as they smoke. The air inside is choking, hot and thick. You can barely last a minute before stumbling out again, eyes streaming. How anyone could sit in there all day without passing out is a mystery. Historians still debate whether children were raised in smoke-heavy homes from birth, making their lungs tougher, or if everyone just coughed constantly, the background music of medieval Scandinavia. By now your clothes have absorbed the smell. It's clinging to your hair, your skin, your soul. You'll never get it out. Even centuries later, when archaeologists dig up your skeleton, they'll probably wrinkle their noses and say, "Ah yes, the fishy one." The villagers, though, carry on without complaint. A man shoulders a heavy sack of dried cod trudging toward a waiting cart. These fish will travel far, maybe even to the bustling markets of England or beyond. Dried cod was basically the Bitcoin of the Viking Age, compact, valuable, and surprisingly durable. You realise you're standing in the middle of an economy, not just a stink fest, and yet your modern stomach still churns. A group of children run past laughing, one waving a fishtail like a flag. You catch yourself smiling despite the nausea. It's their world after all, and somehow they thrive in it. You, on the other hand, are already daydreaming about Febreze. And just when you think your nose has adjusted, a new wave of smoke billows from a nearby fire pit, where someone is rendering fish oil. The stench clings, heavier than before, like a damp wool cloak you can't take off. You're doomed. Your olfactory nerves will never forgive you. Tonight, you'll dream not of soft pillows or warm lights, but of racks of cod, swaying forever in the icy wind. You duck back into the nearest hut, shivering from the sea air, only to realise you've traded one misery for another. The smoke inside wraps around you like an uninvited scarf, and the dim light makes it hard to see much beyond the glowing embers in the centre hearth. You shuffle forward cautiously, blinking through the haze, and then notice the sleeping arrangements, or rather, the lack thereof. Forget your mattress at home. Here, bed is a patch of straw stuffed into a wooden frame, with a faint scent of mildew and goat lingering in the fibres. You lower yourself onto it gingerly, and immediately something sharp pokes your hip. Congratulations. You've discovered the Viking version of a bed spring, an actual twig someone forgot to remove. The room is low-ceilinged, almost cave-like, and lined with rough planks darkened by years of smoke. Turf is packed between the timbers, meant to insulate, though it mostly just holds in the damp. Outside, the North Sea howls. Inside, the draft sneaks through anyway, curling icy fingers down your neck. Central heating? Not for another 1,000 years. You clutch your cloak tighter and wonder how anyone here survives the winter. Historians still argue whether turf houses were marvels of insulation or just mouldy dens of misery. But sitting here with your teeth chattering, you're leaning toward misery. A woman sits by the hearth, turning something in a pot with a wooden ladle. It smells faintly of fish, surprise, surprise, and barley. The smoke from the fire burns your throat as you breathe, and you cough so hard you nearly topple into the straw. The family glances at you, unimpressed. For them, coughing is as normal as the rooster outside. Your lungs are the only ones filing a complaint. A quirky tidbit here. Some Viking houses had raised wooden platforms built along the walls, where entire families would sleep shoulder to shoulder, human heat being the only real blanket. Imagine sharing a bed with not just your spouse, but 3 kids, a grandmother, and occasionally a goat who wandered in because the door didn't latch. You think your roommate's snoring is bad. Try a chorus of snores, wheezes, and bleats echoing off turf walls. Good luck dozing off. You rub your arms trying to get warm and notice your breath puffing in little clouds. Yes, it's that cold inside. The hearth offers light but not much heat, just enough to keep the stew from freezing solid. The smoke stings your eyes so badly that tears slip down your cheeks. Maybe this is why sagas are full of stoic heroes. Everyone was too busy pretending not to cry from smoke irritation. At the back of the hut you spot piles of belongings, bundles of wool, carved wooden bowls, and a small chest with iron fittings. Personal space doesn't exist here. Privacy doesn't either. You're a guest in a home where every cough, every shuffle, every sigh echoes for all to hear. You sneeze loudly. The family looks over. Someone mutters. You're probably earning a new nickname already. Sneeze Face. The damp is constant. It clings to your hair, your clothes, even the straw under you. You stretch your legs, but the frame of the bed is shorter than your body. Vikings weren't tiny people, but their beds often were, built to conserve heat. So you're forced to curl up in a half-fetal position, like a shrimp marinated in smoke. Every joint complains, especially your back, which was already on strike after hauling that rope earlier. Tomorrow, you'll be even stiffer. Welcome to medieval chiropractic care, also known as Deal With It. Mainstream fact time. Archaeologists have uncovered Viking houses with evidence of indoor hearths that burned almost constantly, not just for cooking but for keeping fire alive during long winters. But without chimneys, the smoke lingered low, blackening the beams and coating lungs with soot. Some researchers argue that this contributed to respiratory issues across Viking settlements. Sitting here with your throat raw and your eyes burning, you're inclined to agree. And then there's the floor. Packed earth, sometimes sprinkled with straw or rushes to soak up spills. It's uneven, gritty and damp. When you shift your weight, your boot sinks slightly, and you wonder if you've just stepped in yesterday's soup or something less pleasant. Hygiene wasn't exactly top priority. Yes, they had combs and toothpicks, but a mop? Not so much. You lie back against the straw, staring up at the beams overhead, where smoke curls in slow ribbons. You imagine centuries of families doing the same, listening to the crackle of fire, coughing, muttering, scratching at fleas. And fleas were everywhere. That's not just a joke. Excavated bedding has revealed fossilized flea remains. Tonight you're basically a buffet. You swat at your arm already itching. A goat bleats outside and the sound carries right into the room. The walls muffle nothing. You hear chickens, the distant crash of waves, even the creak of drying racks swaying in the wind. Sleep? Forget it. This is surround sound, Viking edition. Dolby Atmos has nothing on chickens at 3 a.m. You curl tighter, shivering, and try to think warm thoughts. Maybe tomorrow will bring sunshine. Then again, this is the North Atlantic, so probably not. Your body aches, your nose burns, and you're half convinced a straw mattress just moved under you. Don't worry, it's probably only a mouse. Nothing to lose sleep over, right? Still, as miserable as it feels, you're in the heart of daily Viking life. This smoky, drafty, flea-ridden hut was home, a fortress against the cold, a place where families gathered, ate and endured. You, though, are already wondering how fast you can get back to your pillow-top mattress and air purifier. Morning comes earlier than you want it to, though it's hard to tell when morning officially begins in a Viking fishing village. There are no alarm clocks, no coffee machines humming to life, just the muffled sound of boots stomping outside, chickens squawking, and a draught prying you out of the damp straw pile you've been calling a bed. Your back feels like you've slept on a bag of gravel, which, to be fair, isn't far from the truth. The hearth embers glow faintly, but the smoke is thinner now, replaced by the sharper scent of salt air seeping through the cracks. You stretch, yawn, and immediately regret it. Your joints ache like you've just run a marathon in medieval footwear. Before you can even think about crawling back under the thin wool covering, a hand nudges your shoulder. One of the villagers, clearly unimpressed with your sluggishness, gestures toward the door. Translation: Rise and shine, buttercup. It's chore time. In this world, there's no such thing as sleeping in. The ocean doesn't wait, the fish don't leap into nets on their own, and firewood doesn't chop itself. You groan, but you stumble to your feet anyway, brushing bits of straw from your hair. Breakfast will have to wait. Outside, the air is biting cold. A thin mist rises from the fjord, curling around the racks of drying fish. The villagers are already bustling, men lugging nets, women carrying buckets, children running errands with more energy than you can summon. You get handed a bundle of firewood, heavier than it looks. You nearly drop it, earning yourself a chorus of chuckles. Congratulations, you've just become the morning's entertainment. You shuffle toward the longhouse, arms straining under the load. Inside, a woman scrapes out the last of last night's barley stew from a pot. She hands you a small bowl of something greyish, topped with a sliver of pickled herring. This is breakfast. No pancakes, no bacon, no comforting whiff of coffee. Just sour fish and gruel. You take a tentative bite, and the tang of vinegar and salt floods your mouth. Your taste buds revolt. You smile weakly, pretending it's fine, but the villager watching you smirks knowingly. They've seen that face before. Rookies always gag at first. Quirky tidbit. Vikings sometimes ate a dish called surströmming's ancestor. Fermented fish that could make your entire house smell like a garbage truck on fire. Historians still argue whether this delicacy was as common in fishing villages or mostly a later Scandinavian nightmare. but the idea that someone chose to invent it is enough to make you question human decision-making. As you choke down your herring, you realise your breakfast is basically the light version. Lucky you. Once you've eaten, you're shoved toward the shoreline with a group of villagers. Today's task: hauling in the heavy nets that soaked overnight. The ropes are rough, the weights are stubborn, and your soft modern palms are already protesting. Within minutes, blisters bloom like little badges of incompetence. The villagers pull steadily, muscles honed by years of this grind. You, meanwhile, slip in the mud and nearly topple backward. Someone laughs. You're officially the village clown. Next, it's time for wood chopping. A burly man hands you an axe, its blade chipped but deadly sharp. He points at a log and steps back, arms folded. You lift the axe, feeling its weight drag you forward, and swing with all your might. The blade glances off the side, sending a splinter flying dangerously close to your face. The villagers erupt in laughter again. You manage a sheepish grin, then try again. This time the axe sticks halfway into the log, and you have to wrestle it free like a sword in the stone. Spoiler, you're not King Arthur. Eventually a child, yes, a child, steps in and splits the log in one clean swing, leaving you humiliated. Vikings, 1, you, 0. Somewhere in the chaos you're handed another bowl of food. This time it's flatbread, hard enough to double as a weapon, with a smear of dried fish paste. You chew carefully, half afraid your teeth will crack. Dental insurance hasn't been invented yet, so if you chip a molar, that's just your life now. You swallow and try to smile, though inside you're dreaming of bagels and cream cheese. Mainstream fact check. Viking diets relied heavily on fish, grains and dairy, supplemented by meat when available. Archaeological finds suggest they brewed mead and ale, even for breakfast, since clean water wasn't always reliable. You eye a jug of something frothy and wonder if this morning might improve with a sip of Viking beer. Then again, drinking before hauling nets might not be the smartest move. Still, it's tempting. As the morning drags on, you're herded from task to task, collecting seaweed for fertilizer, mending a torn net, scraping scales off yesterday's catch. Your muscles ache in places you didn't know existed. Your clothes reek of fish, smoke, and sweat, and it's not even noon. The villagers move with a rhythm, efficient and unbothered. For them, this is just another day. For you, it's a reality show challenge where the prize is surviving until lunch. Historians still debate how much outsiders would have been expected to contribute in daily life, but looking at the way the villagers toss you chores without hesitation, you suspect the answer is absolutely everything. No freeloaders here. You think longingly of your warm bed at home, your lazy weekend mornings, your coffee rituals. Here, leisure is a luxury you can't afford. You're not here to relax, you're here to work or you won't eat. By the time the sun crawls higher over the fjord, your arms are rubber, your stomach is queasy, and you're ready to collapse back into that smoky hut. Instead, someone claps you on the back, hard enough to knock the wind out of you, and shoves another rope into your hands. More chores await. In this world, rest isn't earned, it's postponed indefinitely, and you're only halfway through the morning. By now, you've earned yourself a blister or two, and maybe even the beginnings of a pulled muscle. But the day isn't slowing down. The villagers shove you toward another task. This time, it's preserving fish. You think, how bad can it be? But the moment you step into the small shed where the process happens, your nostrils beg for mercy. Salt, rot, and smoke fill the air in equal measure. If smells could slap, this one would have knocked you flat on your back. Long wooden tables are covered with fish in various states of dismantling. Some are freshly gutted, others half-dried, and still others lying in barrels stewing in layers of salt. A woman points at a tub, clearly expecting you to help rub the coarse salt into the flesh of a large cod. You plunge your hands in, and the grains bite into your already raw palms. The fish is slimy, the salt abrasive, and your stomach churns as the smell clings to your skin. You'll be carrying this stench for the rest of the day, and probably the rest of your life. Salt here isn't just seasoning, it's life insurance. Without refrigeration, fish spoils faster than a forgotten lunchbox in summer. By salting it heavily, the villagers ensure it lasts months, maybe even years, if kept dry. Historians still argue whether Viking communities relied more on drying racks or salted barrels for their exports, But either way, your modern gag reflex doesn't care. You're elbow deep in the medieval equivalent of a fish processing factory, and you're one sneeze away from seasoning your own sleeve. A quirky tidbit, salted fish wasn't only for eating. Sometimes it doubled as currency in trade with neighbouring settlements or even far-off towns. Dried cod, known as stockfish, was tough enough to survive long voyages and valuable enough to be swapped for goods like furs, cloth, or even silver. You look at the slimy cod under your hands and wonder who in their right mind would exchange this for silver. But then again, in a world where fish equals survival, it makes sense. Still, you'd trade it for a cheeseburger in a heartbeat. After your clumsy attempts at salting, someone directs you to the drying racks again. You're handed a bundle of fish strung on rope, each one dripping faintly, and told to hang them on the tall wooden poles. You try to toss the rope over, but it slips and whacks you in the face, leaving you with the dubious honour of being slapped by a cod. The villagers don't even hide their laughter this time. You rub your cheek, muttering under your breath, but climb onto the slippery logs to hang the fish anyway. Every step is a balancing act. You're one wobble away from falling face first into a puddle of brine. Once the fish are hung, the smell becomes overwhelming. The salty sweet stench seeps into your hair, your clothes, even the inside of your nose. You realise you'll never smell normal again. You could bathe in lavender oil for a week and still smell faintly of rotting cod. Congratulations, you've become one of them, at least in odour. As the morning drags into afternoon, you help haul heavy barrels into a corner of the shed. Each one sloshes ominously, saltwater brine leaking around the rims. The weight is brutal. Your arms quiver with every lift. Vikings, of course, carry them with ease, their shoulders broad, their hands calloused. You're the weak link in this chain, and everyone knows it. You nearly drop a barrel once, catching it just in time, your knees buckling under the strain. The villager beside you shakes his head, muttering something that probably translates to hopeless. Mainstream fact time. Archaeological digs in northern Norway and Iceland have uncovered evidence of massive fish processing operations, with entire villages dedicated to producing stockfish for export. Some scholars suggest that the cod trade was one of the economic backbones of the Viking world, fueling expeditions and even raids. You glance around at the racks, the barrels, the endless piles of fish, and realise you're standing inside one of history's less glamorous engines of commerce. No dragons, no treasure, just salted cod. And yet the work isn't done. You're handed a small scraping tool and told to clean the tables where the guts had been spilled earlier. The smell is eye-watering, the slime cold against your fingers. You scrape, gag, scrape again. A child passes by, holding her nose dramatically, mocking you with a grin. You can't even be mad, she's right. You smell worse than the tables. The sun creeps lower, but the work doesn't ease up. Fish keep arriving from the boats, hauled in by teams of men with nets slung over their shoulders. You help drag a load into the shed, the scales glinting faintly in the dim light. They pile onto the table with a wet thump, and you sigh. More salting, more drying, more scraping. It's endless. You think back to your old life, where meal prep meant putting leftovers in a Tupperware. Here it's a full-time job that leaves you smelling like Poseidon's laundry basket. Historians still debate just how unbearable these working conditions were, whether villagers grew used to the smell, or whether they too coughed, gagged, and rolled their eyes at the endless stench. Judging by the looks on their faces now, you suspect it's the latter. They may be tough, but even they wrinkle their noses when the wind shifts wrong. Misery, after all, is communal. By the time evening begins creeping in, your arms ache, your nose has stopped working properly, and your clothes could probably be hung on the racks as their own form of preserved fish. You slump against a post, too tired to care that it's smeared with grease. The villagers still bustle around, tying ropes, stacking barrels, chasing off scavenging dogs. You're done for the day, or so you hope, because tomorrow the fish will still be here, and the day after, and the day after that. This smell? It's forever. You think the worst of the day's chores must be behind you. Fish salted, barrels stacked, your dignity thoroughly marinated in cod slime. But no, now comes the part the villagers actually care about, rowing out to sea. A group of men wave you over toward a long, narrow boat bobbing at the dock. The water slaps against its sides with a steady rhythm, like a drumbeat reminding you that resistance is futile. They hand you an oar, long enough to double as a telephone pole, and gesture for you to climb aboard. You hesitate, wobbling as you step into the boat. The planks creak beneath your weight, and for one alarming second you think you might tip everyone into the fjord. Great start. You sit on the rough bench, oar across your knees, while the others settle into place. Without a word, they dip their oars into the water and begin to row in unison. You scramble to follow, shoving your oar into the icy sea. The resistance is immediate, like trying to stir concrete with a broomstick. Your arms scream in protest. The others row smoothly, muscles moving like well-oiled gears. You, meanwhile, splash more than you propel. A boy in the stern laughs at your technique. If nicknames were currency, you'd already be known as Splashy. The rhythm of the rowing sets in, pull, dip, push, pull. But you're always half a beat behind. Your oar clunks against your neighbour's, earning you a sharp glare. You mumble an apology, though it's lost in the rush of wind. The sea stretches out ahead, vast and grey, the fjord's cliffs falling away as the boat noses toward open water. The horizon feels endless, and you wonder how anyone ever found the courage to sail across oceans in a vessel like this. Historians still argue whether Viking boats were mostly for raiding, or if fishing fleets like these were equally essential, but sitting here with your palms already blistering, you can confirm both required stamina you definitely lack. A quirky tidbit: Viking oars weren't always fixed. Some boats had oarlocks cut right into the hull, meaning your oar could slip out if you weren't careful. Imagine explaining that to your crew after losing their paddle to the sea. You grip yours tightly, knuckles white, determined not to become the village joke again. But the wood is slick from spray and your hands are soft compared to theirs. Every stroke feels like a battle, every pull like an argument with gravity. The waves grow larger as the boat leaves the calm of the fjord. Spray hits your face, cold and stinging, and you sputter, blinking salt from your eyes. The others row without breaking rhythm, barely acknowledging the slap of water. You're drenched within minutes, your hoodie soaked through, clinging like a soggy rag. The wool cloaks around you shed water, staying relatively dry, but you're not so lucky. You shiver, teeth chattering, and still the rowing continues. Your shoulders burn, your wrists ache, and you start to wonder if you'll even make it to the fishing grounds. The man in front of you hums a tune, keeping time with the strokes. It's steady, calming, almost hypnotic. You try to follow along, but every time you think you've got it, your oar drags awkwardly, splashing your neighbour. Another glare. If glares were swords, you'd already be skewered. Mainstream fact: Viking fishing boats could carry crews of 6 to 12 men, each responsible for a heavy oar. These weren't pleasure cruisers, they were workhorses designed for long hours on the water. Archaeological finds, like the famous Gokstad ship, show the sheer craftsmanship of Viking boat builders. Sitting here, sore and soaked, you appreciate the craftsmanship less for its beauty, and more for the fact that the boat hasn't capsized under your clumsy rowing. As the hours stretch, your hands develop hot spots that quickly turn into blisters. You grit your teeth, trying not to yelp as the rough wood rubs skin raw. The others ignore your struggle, their faces calm, their strokes smooth. This is routine for them, day after day of rowing, hauling, casting. For you, it's torture disguised as cardio. You're half convinced your arms will detach and sink to the bottom of the sea. The horizon begins to shift. You spot the dark shapes of seabirds circling ahead, diving toward the waves. The fishermen nod knowingly. Where there are birds, there are fish. They row harder, the boat cutting through the water with new urgency. You try to match their pace, but your strokes are weak, sloppy. The boy in the stern calls out something that makes the men laugh. You don't need to speak Old Norse to know the joke's about you. And yet, despite the pain, the rhythm starts to sink in. For a few glorious strokes, you find yourself in sync with the crew. The oars dip and rise together, the boat glides smoothly, and you almost feel like you belong. Then your oar catches awkwardly, sending a splash of seawater onto the man beside you. The moment is gone. He mutters darkly, shaking his head. You sigh. Splashy, it is. By the time the boat slows, your arms are noodles, your palms shredded, and your back a stiff plank. You collapse against the bench, panting. The others barely seem winded. They tie off the oars and ready the nets while you sit uselessly, trying not to cry from exhaustion. The sea rocks gently beneath you, and for one fleeting second you consider just lying down and letting the ocean take you. But no, this is only the beginning. The real work is still to come. The boat drifts farther from shore, and suddenly the calm of the fjord gives way to the restless push and pull of the open sea. The horizon stretches out endlessly, grey water blending into grey sky until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. The oars are stowed now, and the fishermen ready their nets, but you're too distracted to help. Your stomach has other priorities, namely staging a full rebellion. Every sway of the boat churns your insides like a blender on high speed. You lean over the side, trying to keep your breakfast where it belongs, but the rocking doesn't let up. The waves rise and fall, pitching the boat in a rhythm designed to remind you just how fragile your land-dwelling body is. The men chuckle when they see your pale face. Seasickness, to them, is the mark of a novice. To you, it feels like the end of days. A boy at the stern makes exaggerated gagging noises, clearly mocking you. You can't even be offended. You're too busy trying not to join in for real. You squeeze your eyes shut, focusing on the sound of the water lapping against the hull, hoping to trick your brain into calm. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Historians still argue whether Vikings had remedies for seasickness, ginger, herbs, or simply toughing it out. But whatever they used, you don't have it. You just have the rocking, the queasy stomach, and the humiliating realization that you're not built for this. One fisherman offers you a chunk of dried bread, maybe as comfort, maybe as a joke. You nibble it, but the dry, crumbly texture only makes things worse. You swallow hard, forcing it down, and give him a weak thumbs up. He laughs, shaking his head. You've become the in-flight entertainment. Quirky tidbit. Sagas sometimes describe warriors vomiting during rough voyages, though usually they gloss over it quickly as if to save face. The heroes are always seasick for half a line before they're back to slaying sea monsters. You, however, are not bouncing back. You're stuck in that half line forever, bent over the side, praying to any god who'll listen. The smell doesn't help. Fish guts, salt brine, wet wool, and the faint tang of tar from the boat's seams all mix into one pungent perfume. It clings to your nose, intensifying the nausea. You try breathing through your mouth, but that just makes you taste the salt air, which is somehow worse. A wave splashes up, dousing your face with icy spray. You gasp, sputtering, and the men roar with laughter. Great. You're the seasick jester in their Viking circus, and yet you can't deny the view is breathtaking. Between waves, the sea opens up into vast, glittering plains of silver, sunlight breaking through clouds to shimmer on the surface. Seabirds wheel overhead, their cries sharp against the wind. For a moment you forget your stomach and simply stare. This is the same horizon the Vikings once followed to Greenland, Iceland, even America. You're sitting in the same kind of boat that crossed oceans. The thought is both awe-inspiring and horrifying. If you can't handle this fishing trip, how would you have survived weeks on the North Atlantic? The answer, you wouldn't. The boat pitches suddenly and you grab the side, knuckles white. Water sloshes over the edge, soaking your boots. The fishermen barely blink. To them, this is calm weather. You shudder to imagine what rough seas would look like. You slump against the bench, eyes closed, trying to breathe slowly, evenly. Inhale, exhale, ignore the nausea. Somewhere in the distance, someone starts humming again. A low tune that matches the rhythm of the waves. It's strangely soothing, even as your stomach flips. Mainstream fact. Norse seafarers navigated not just with the stars, but also with the flight of birds and the colour of the water. Out here, surrounded by endless grey, you realise how skilled they had to be. Without GPS, without maps, just instinct and experience. You, on the other hand, can't even find your balance in the boat. A fisherman steadies you as you nearly topple with the next roll. He mutters something that might translate to hopeless, though his tone is more amused than cruel. The rocking continues, relentless. Every wave is a reminder that you are a guest here, an intruder in a world that belongs to the sea and those who've learned to master it. You're clumsy, nauseous, fragile. The fishermen don't pity you. They simply work around you, hauling ropes, preparing nets, ignoring your misery. To them, seasickness is background noise like gulls or wind. You're just another sound in the chorus of the ocean. Finally, after what feels like hours of torment, your stomach begins to settle. Maybe you've adjusted, or maybe you've simply run out of energy to be sick. You sit back, breathing slowly, watching the horizon steady itself in your vision. The fishermen don't notice your tiny victory, but you do. For a fleeting moment you feel almost capable. Almost. Then another wave slaps the boat, and the nausea returns with a vengeance. The nets are ready, coiled like sleeping serpents in the bottom of the boat. A fisherman gives a sharp command, and suddenly the crew springs into action. You, still queasy from the waves, try to keep up as they heave the heavy mesh over the side. It unspools with a hiss, splashing into the water, vanishing beneath the waves. The boat rocks harder with the effort, and you grab the gunwale to steady yourself, praying you don't topple overboard. Because let's be honest, if you go in, these waters aren't forgiving. Vikings knew hypothermia long before anyone had a name for it. The men row in short bursts, dragging the net into position, then wait. The silence stretches, broken only by gulls screeching overhead. Then comes the signal. They haul together, muscles straining, pulling the net back hand over hand. You're shoved into place and grab the rough rope, instantly regretting it. The weight is staggering. It's like trying to pull a truck out of a ditch, only wetter and slimier. Your arms tremble, your shoulders ache, and the rope burns your blistered palms. You grit your teeth and pull anyway, determined not to be the weak link yet again. The net breaks the surface, heavy with silver bodies thrashing wildly. Fish spill over the edge, flopping across the deck, scales flashing in the grey light. One slaps against your leg, another smacks your hand, and soon you're surrounded by a chaotic, slippery avalanche. The fishermen move fast, grabbing, sorting, tossing the catch into baskets. You, on the other hand, scramble to keep your footing. The deck is slick, your boots sliding dangerously. A cod the size of a loaf of bread slaps you square in the chest, and you stumble backward. The crew laughs uproariously, while you try to peel fish scales off your damp hoodie. Congratulations, today's entertainment continues. Mainstream fact: cod was the backbone of Viking fishing economies, prized for its abundance and ease of preservation. Entire settlements thrived on stockfish exports. You're living that reality right now, except instead of making money, you're being pelted by fish. Historians still argue whether fishing trips like these were daily communal events or more seasonal endeavours, but judging by the sheer effort, you're betting on constant labour. The ocean doesn't hand out free lunches, a quirky tidbit. Cod livers were used for oil, both as lamp fuel and as a sort of health supplement. Yes, that infamous cod liver oil your grandparents swore by. Its roots are here, sloshing around in barrels while children gag at the taste. You watch a fisherman casually slit a fish open, set aside the liver, and drop it into a wooden tub. The smell is sharp, metallic, almost medicinal. Your stomach flips again. You silently vow never to complain about modern multivitamins again. The work doesn't stop with the haul. The men begin untangling the nets, hands moving quickly to free the wriggling fish. You're handed one to try. Within seconds, you've got the mesh wrapped around your wrist like some kind of medieval friendship bracelet gone wrong. A fisherman steps in, shaking his head, and frees it in one smooth motion. You mutter thanks, cheeks burning. Clearly you're not cut out for this. More fish flop onto the deck, tails smacking, mouths gasping. You try to help by tossing them into baskets, but every time you grab one it squirms free, slimy and determined to escape. One even flips right out of your hands, landing with a splash back into the sea. The men groan in unison. You've just thrown dinner overboard. Fantastic. If looks could kill, you'd be cod chow by now. The boat rocks harder under the weight of the catch, seawater sloshing across the boards. Your boots fill with cold water, squelching with every step. You can't tell if you're wetter from the sea spray or the fish slime. Either way, you're soaked through, chilled to the bone and more than a little humiliated. The fishermen meanwhile work steadily, sorting the catch into neat piles, as if this chaos is nothing new. For them, it's Tuesday. For you, it's survival boot camp with extra fish. Historians still debate how much of this labour was shared by the entire community. Did women and children join in at sea, or stick to shore tasks? Looking around at these hardened men, you suspect the answer is somewhere in between. But right now, the only certainty is that you're the clumsiest crew member afloat. Finally, the nets are hauled in, dripping and empty. The baskets are brimming, the deck littered with scales and blood. The fishermen rest their arms, wiping sweat from their brows. You slump against the side of the boat, exhausted, smelling like a bait shop dumpster on a hot day. Your hands are raw, your back screams and your pride is in tatters, and yet you helped. Barely, awkwardly, but you were part of the haul. Somewhere deep in your queasy, fish-splattered self, a tiny flicker of satisfaction stirs. Then a fisherman dumps a basket at your feet, grinning. He points to the pile of wriggling fish and makes a cutting motion with his hand. Translation: start gutting. Your stomach drops. The sea, it seems, isn't done with you yet. The boat noses back toward shore, heavy with the day's catch. You stagger onto the dock, legs wobbling like half-set jelly, grateful to be on solid ground again, though, to be fair, the ground is still slick with fish guts and seawater, so it's not exactly solid. You drag the baskets toward the village with the others, arms trembling, boots squelching, the smell of cod now tattooed permanently into your skin. Just when you think you're about to collapse into your straw bed and beg for mercy, you're steered not toward rest, but toward a gathering at the edge of the settlement. Today isn't only about catching fish, it's also about trading them. The open area between huts has turned into a makeshift market. Villagers from nearby coves arrive on foot or by boat, their cloaks damp from sea spray, their sledges loaded with goods. Bartering begins immediately. A chorus of voices haggling, bargaining, gesturing with everything from silver trinkets to squirming livestock. You stand in the middle of it all, overwhelmed, wondering how anyone keeps track of value without neat little price tags. Cod is the currency of the day. Your village offers piles of dried stockfish, stiff as wood planks, stacked in bundles. In exchange, neighbours bring furs, soft fox pelts, thick seal skins, perfect for a winter you already dread. Others unload amber, glowing golden in the weak light, little pieces of fossilised sunshine. A man even offers a carved walrus tusk, its ivory gleaming. You can't help but think of it as the Viking equivalent of high-end decor. Somewhere someone is probably planning to use it as a status flex butter knife. You're handed a basket of stockfish and told to make yourself useful. You shuffle forward awkwardly, clutching the stiff, smelly planks. A woman with a bundle of wool eyes your basket. She points, then holds up her wool as an offer. You freeze. Is this a fair trade? Historians still argue whether wool or stockfish held greater value in everyday Viking life. You, however, are unqualified to judge. You shrug, nod, and make the trade. The woman beams, while the villager beside you groans. Apparently you've just traded enough fish for half a blanket when you could have gotten a whole one. Congratulations. You're terrible at bartering. Quirky tidbit. Vikings sometimes used live animals in trade, not just their products. Right on cue, a man drags over a bleating sheep, its hooves skidding in the mud. He gestures toward your basket of stockfish. You hesitate. A sheep for cod? That seems like a lot. But before you can protest, one of your fellow villagers shakes your shoulder and nods. The deal is struck. Suddenly you're responsible for a very confused sheep tugging at its rope. You try to lead us away, but it promptly headbutts you in the hip. The crowd laughs. Great. You've gone from Splashy the seasick to sheep herd in less than a day. The market buzzes on. You pass stalls of smoked fish, carved wooden tools, even a woman offering strands of glass beads, bright and glittering. Glass wasn't common here. It often came from distant lands via trade. You marvel at the colours, tiny windows into a broader world of exchange. This isn't just a sleepy fishing village. It's part of a network stretching across seas, rivers and borders, and you, the clumsy outsider, are in the thick of it. Mainstream fact. Viking trade routes reached as far as the Byzantine Empire, carrying everything from fish and furs to slaves and silver. While this little market isn't Constantinople, the principle is the same. Exchange goods, build alliances, survive the winter. You're witnessing the roots of a global economy, one stiff cod at a time. The sheep tugs at you again, bleating loudly, as if to remind you of your terrible deal. You stumble, nearly colliding with a man carrying a cage of chickens. Feathers fly, squawks erupt, and now you're juggling livestock like a medieval clown. The villagers find this hilarious, of course. One boy offers to hold the sheep while you regroup. You hand it over gratefully, rubbing your sore hip. Perhaps you're not cut out for animal husbandry after all. The trading winds down as the sun dips lower. Villagers pack up, boats push off, and the market clears. You're left standing with aching arms, empty baskets, and the faint impression that you lost more deals than you won. Still, the village gained wool, amber, and even a goat someone traded 3 bundles of fish for. You may be a disaster, but collectively, the market was a success. Historians still debate whether these small-scale exchanges were as critical as long-distance raids in sustaining Viking communities. Looking around at the happy faces, the goods carried into huts, the satisfied bleats of newly acquired animals, you think maybe they were. After all, raids are risky. Trading cod for wool is, well, safer. Unless you're the one being headbutted by the sheep. As night falls, you're finally released from duties. You slump against a post, exhausted, smelling like fish, sweat, and livestock. Around you, villagers chatter, laugh, and share mugs of ale, satisfied with the day's exchanges. You sigh, closing your eyes, knowing tomorrow will bring another round of chores, another load of fish, another chance to embarrass yourself. And yet, in a strange way, you've survived. For now. By the time you shuffle into the longhouse, night has settled over the village. The air outside is sharp with sea mist, but inside the hall it's warm, smoky, and alive with voices. The flicker of torches paints the timber beams in golden shadow, and you're instantly enveloped in the smell of roasted meat, sour ale, and, of course, fish. After a day of rowing, hauling, and being slapped by cod, the thought of sitting down with a drink feels like winning the lottery. You squeeze onto a bench between two broad-shouldered fishermen, your damp clothes steaming faintly by the fire. Someone pushes a wooden cup into your hands. You sniff cautiously. The liquid smells earthy, smoky, and a little sour. This is ale, brewed with barley and flavoured with herbs, and yes, even kids drink it. Clean water isn't always a guarantee, but beer is. You take a sip and the taste is strange, thick, a bit gritty, with a smoky afterbite that clings to your tongue. It's not refreshing so much as it is functional, like Viking Gatorade. Still, after the day you've had, it's bliss. You take another gulp and let out a sigh loud enough that the men beside you laugh. The longhouse buzzes with chatter. Women mend nets in the corner while men brag about the day's catch. Children dart between benches chasing each other until a stern shout sends them skidding to a halt. You sit back, sipping your ale, watching the dynamics unfold. This is more than just dinner. It's where gossip is shared, disputes aired, alliances formed. The walls of the longhouse echo with laughter, curses, and the occasional bark of a dog weaving between legs in search of scraps. Quirky tidbit. Viking ale was sometimes flavoured with bog myrtle, a herb that could act as a mild hallucinogen if brewed strongly enough. Imagine having 3 mugs of that and then trying to argue property rights. You look at your cup and hope tonight's brew is just the regular sleepy time variety, not the, oops, I just saw Odin in the rafters blend. Your neighbour leans in, muttering about a family feud with a rival village. His tone is sharp, his voice low, but you catch enough to understand. Someone insulted someone else's honour, and now there's talk of settling it with a raid. The other men grunt, nodding, voices rising as the story grows grander with each retelling. Historians still argue how much of Viking life was defined by raiding versus farming and fishing, but judging by tonight's chatter, both weighed heavily on their minds. Fish may keep them fed, but honour keeps them restless. A group at the far end of the hall starts singing, voices weaving together in a rough harmony. The song is loud, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, punctuated by the thud of mugs on wooden tables. You tap your foot along, though you don't know the words. The fisherman beside you claps you on the back, nearly spilling your ale. You grin weakly, pretending to join in, though your contribution is more off-key humming than anything else. Plates of food are passed down the line, more fish, of course, but also roasted lamb, hard bread, and bowls of thick stew. You dig in, grateful for anything warm. The bread could double as roofing material, but you chew carefully, washing it down with ale. Your stomach growls, your hands shake. But finally, for the first time today, you feel something close to contentment. Warmth, food, company. It's almost enough to make you forget the smell of fish permanently baked into your skin, until the arguments start. 2 men across the hall are locked in a heated debate. One slams his mug down, ale sloshing across the table. The other rises, red-faced, shouting something about stolen nets. Voices rise, benches scrape, and for a moment you think fists will fly. Then the elder of the hall stands, staff in hand, and the room falls silent. His voice booms, stern and commanding, and the tension drains away, mostly. The men sit back down, muttering into their mugs. Crisis averted, for now. Mainstream fact: longhouses weren't just homes, they were community centres, spaces for feasting, storytelling and settling disputes. Archaeological remains show benches lining the walls, hearths in the centre, and enough room to house dozens. Tonight you're living history, squashed between two snoring fishermen and a goat that somehow wandered inside. Yes, there's a goat in here now, chewing calmly on someone's cloak. Nobody seems concerned. You sip your ale, half listening to the conversations around you. One group discusses the price of amber, another whispers about distant lands where silver flows like water. A woman tells a tale of a storm that wrecked 3 boats last winter, her voice soft but carrying a weight that silences those nearby. The room shifts between laughter and solemnity, joy and worry, in an endless cycle. You sit in the middle, an outsider, soaking it all in. This isn't a reenactment or a museum tour, it's the real heartbeat of Viking village life. Your eyelids droop as the fire crackles, warmth seeping into your bones. The noise fades into a comforting hum, mugs clinking, voices murmuring, children giggling. For the first time since you arrived, you almost feel at ease. Almost. Then the goat sneezes in your lap and the moment is ruined. The men laugh, clapping you on the shoulder, and the night rolls on, filled with smoke, ale, and gossip darker than the beer itself. The night deepens, and after the ale and gossip, the mood in the longhouse shifts towards something quieter, more reverent. The chatter softens, the singing fades, and a hush falls as a man steps forward carrying a small carved figure. It's a wooden idol, no bigger than your forearm, worn smooth by many hands. He sets it near the fire, and suddenly everyone seems to lean in a little closer. You realise you're about to witness one of the village's rituals, half practical, half mystical, all rooted in the belief that their lives depend on more than muscle and fish. The figure is a simple carving, maybe of Thor, maybe of Njord, the sea god. It's hard to tell, the features are crude, but the reverence is clear. The fisherman who carried it begins to speak in a low voice, offering thanks for the day's catch and asking for safe waters tomorrow. His words roll in Old Norse, incomprehensible to you, but the rhythm is steady, like the tide. Around you, villagers bow their heads, murmuring responses. Even the children go quiet. For a moment, the smoky hall feels like a temple. Historians still argue how formal Viking religion was in everyday life. Some say rituals like this were deeply ingrained, tied to every meal and voyage. Others suggest they were more casual, woven into storytelling rather than strict worship. What's clear tonight is that faith is inseparable from fish. These people believe the gods decide whether nets come up empty or bursting. You, still sore and smelling like cod, can't help but hope the gods have mercy on your blistered hands. A quirky detail slips in when a woman sets a small offering of dried fish near the idol. You blink. Fish as a sacrifice to the gods? It feels almost comical, yet fitting. Here, fish are life, wealth, survival. Why wouldn't the gods want their share? Somewhere deep in the sagas, you're sure there's a god rolling his eyes at yet another cod dropped onto his divine altar. Still, no one laughs. The gesture is solemn, meaningful. You keep your grin to yourself. The air grows heavier as more villagers add offerings. A scrap of wool, a piece of bread, a few drops of ale poured carefully onto the hearth. The fire hisses, sending up sparks. Smoke curls around the idol, making its features dance in the shifting light. For a moment you half expect it to blink at you, to nod as if acknowledging the devotion. Maybe that's the ale talking. Maybe it's the bog myrtle herbs they used in the brew. Either way, you sit straighter, heart thumping as the prayers roll on. Then comes the chanting, low, rhythmic, more like humming than singing. The sound builds, layered voices filling the hall, vibrating in your chest. It's mesmerizing, lulling you into a trance. You close your eyes and feel the floor beneath you hum with the rhythm. For a moment, seasickness and blisters are forgotten. You're just a part of this circle, a small thread in the fabric of their world. Mainstream fact: Viking belief blended Norse mythology with practical superstition. Sailors often made offerings to Njord or Thor before voyages, hoping for calm seas. Archaeologists have found carved amulets of Thor's hammer buried with fishermen, tokens of protection against the dangers of the sea. You wonder if the man beside you wears one under his cloak, hidden against his chest. You consider how comforting it must be to believe some god has your back out there. especially when the ocean wants to swallow you whole. The chanting softens, tapering off like waves retreating from shore. The idol is lifted, passed around for each person to touch. When it reaches you, your palms sweat. You cradle the worn wood awkwardly, unsure what gesture is expected. The villagers watch. You mutter a clumsy thanks in English, then quickly hand it off. They nod politely, though one boy snickers. Great. You've just embarrassed yourself in front of both the village and possibly Thor. Fingers crossed, he doesn't smite you with lightning for being awkward. As the ritual ends, the villagers relax. The idol is placed back in its resting spot, and conversation resumes, softer now, tinged with reverence. Stories drift into the air, tales of Odin's wisdom, of Thor's hammer striking down giants, of Njord calming storms. The children lean in, wide-eyed, soaking up myth as if it were fact. You realise these stories aren't just entertainment. They're instruction manuals, survival guides, reminders that every fish hauled in and every storm endured ties back to forces greater than themselves. Quirky as it sounds, one fisherman insists that herring shoals are guided by invisible sea spirits, leading boats to bounty if properly respected. The others nod, not dismissing it. Historians still debate how literally these beliefs were held, but here, in the smoky glow of the longhouse, it doesn't matter. Belief is as tangible as the fish piled outside, as vital as the nets hanging to dry. The night stretches on, voices soft, fire crackling, faith and fish intertwined. You lean back, eyelids drooping, listening to the murmurs. Maybe tomorrow you'll be braver on the water. Maybe the gods will forgive your clumsy hands. For now, you let the sound of ancient prayers wash over you, as steady and relentless as the sea itself. The longhouse grows quieter as the fire burns low, but dawn creeps fast in these northern lands. You wake with a stiff neck, straw clinging to your hair, and the faint sound of wind rattling the turf roof. The villagers are already up, voices carrying outside as they gather for another round of chores. But this morning feels different. There's a tension in the air, an edge to their movements. Winter is pressing closer and the food stores must last. You drag yourself out into the cold, shivering, only to be handed a hard, dark loaf of bread. It looks harmless enough until you bite down and nearly chip a tooth. Welcome to Viking survival cuisine. This bread, made from barley and rye, is dense, dry, and tough as stone. It was baked days ago, maybe weeks. A woman gestures for you to dunk it into a bowl of thin fish broth to soften it. You obey, chewing carefully, the broth salty and sour. This is breakfast, lunch, and possibly dinner too, if supplies run low. Historians still argue whether Viking diets leaned heavily on bread or fish during the coldest months. But judging by your cracked molar, bread certainly wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity, filling bellies even when flavour went missing. Quirky tidbit, some Viking bread contained ground-up tree bark. Yes, bark. Birch or pine mixed into flour when grain supplies ran short. You chew your hunk suspiciously, wondering if the gritty texture is barley husk or a fragment of woodland. Either way, it's edible. Barely. You swallow, wincing, and glance at the fish stew simmering nearby. The oily broth offers little comfort, but at least it's warm. You sip it, imagining you're at a cosy cafe. The illusion lasts about 2 seconds. The villagers are busy checking the storage shed, where racks of dried fish hang like rows of salted skeletons. Barrels of pickled herring line the floor, sealed with wax, their brine pungent enough to sting your nose. You help lift one, the weight nearly toppling you. The fisherman beside you steadies it easily, smirking. For them, this is survival stockpile. For you, it's back-breaking punishment. Every salted cod represents a meal that keeps starvation away when the sea freezes or storms rage too strong to fish. You begin to realise winter here isn't just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Mainstream fact. Archaeological finds in Iceland and Norway reveal storage pits and fish racks designed to keep food edible through months of snow and ice. Evidence shows that without preserved fish, communities could never have survived northern winters. You glance at the racks, the barrels, the endless piles, and suddenly the stink makes sense. It's not just about trade, it's life or death. Still, you can't help gagging as a lid is lifted and the sour fumes of pickled herring hit your face like a slap. The villagers gather round the hearth, dipping bread into broth, chewing slowly. The conversation is subdued. They talk of storms coming early, of nets tearing in rough seas, of last year's hunger when supplies ran thin. One woman recalls neighbours selling their furs just to buy more grain. A man mutters about fishing grounds running empty. Historians still debate how frequent famine really was in Viking settlements. But tonight's murmurs paint a bleak picture. This isn't just another season. It's a gamble. If the stores run out, there's no safety net. You gnaw your bread, teeth aching, stomach growling, and suddenly long for something soft, fresh and warm. A croissant, a bagel, anything. Instead, you break another piece of barley brick and soak it in broth, hoping not to break a tooth this time. The villagers don't complain. They chew, swallow, and move on. For them, hunger is a shadow that lingers at the edge of every winter. You, the outsider, finally understand why they salt and smoke every scrap of fish, why they barter so fiercely, why every cod is gold. In this world, you don't just live with hunger, you fight it every single day. The mood in the village shifts again as evening winds down. After chores and the grim breakfast of bark bread and pickled herring, people gather in the longhouse. But this time the air isn't filled with laughter or gossip. Instead, it's heavy with stories of storms and shipwrecks. Cautionary tales meant to remind everyone just how thin the line between survival and disaster really is. You sit close to the fire, grateful for warmth even as smoke stings your eyes, and listen as voices weave through the smoky air. A fisherman begins with a tale of a storm that struck last autumn. His voice is low and steady, carrying over the crackle of the hearth. He describes black clouds rolling in like a wall, the wind screaming so loud it drowned out voices, and waves that rose higher than the boat's mast. You shiver, picturing the fragile wooden craft tossed around like a toy. He speaks of men clinging to the sides, hands raw, prayers flying to Njord and Thor, but the sea didn't listen. 3 boats went out. Only one returned. The room falls silent at his final words. Even the children, usually restless, sit still, wide-eyed. For them, these aren't just ghost stories. They're warnings written in salt water and fear. Historians still argue whether Viking seafarers exaggerated their tales of storms for dramatic effect in sagas, or whether they underplayed them to highlight bravery. Sitting here, listening to the raw grief in the fisherman's voice, you suspect the storms needed no exaggeration. The sea was brutal enough on its own. Another villager takes up the thread, recalling a wreck farther north, where a boat broke apart against the rocks. He swears he saw pieces of the hull wash ashore, tangled with nets and the bodies of men he knew. The waves claimed them before their families could even bury them properly. The hall murmurs in sympathy, heads bowing briefly in respect. Death at sea is both expected and feared here, a constant shadow. You swallow hard, the fishy stew in your stomach suddenly heavier. A quirky tidbit emerges when someone mentions a ghost light seen dancing on the waves before storms, a flicker of fire on the mast, a sign from the gods. Today, you'd call it St. Elmo's fire, a natural electrical phenomenon. To them, it's a warning or perhaps a blessing, depending on who tells the story. Tonight, the tale paints it as a bad omen, a sign that the sea was hungry. The villagers nod solemnly, as if they've all seen it at some point, that eerie glow that means trouble is brewing. The wind outside picks up, rattling the turf walls, making the longhouse groan. For a moment you imagine a storm breaking right now, the sea tearing into the village, the huts ripped apart. Your heart pounds. You glance around at the calm faces of the villagers, and you realise they live with this fear every day. Storms aren't what-ifs here, they're when. Mainstream fact. Viking ships were marvels of engineering. Sleek, flexible, able to cut through waves with surprising grace. But even the best craftsmanship couldn't withstand every gale. Archaeological finds of wrecks along Scandinavian coasts prove how often ships met their end against rock and surf. You picture one of those boats lying beneath the waves, its timbers slowly rotting, its story forgotten except in nights like this. The stories continue, some laced with tragedy, others with survival. One man tells of clinging to a piece of wreckage for hours, washed ashore half dead but alive. The hall cheers at his resilience, clapping him on the back. Another recalls losing nets to a storm, not men but livelihoods. The loss stings almost as much because no nets mean no fish, and no fish mean hunger. The sea doesn't just take lives, it takes futures. As the fire burns low, the voices soften. The stories are less about horror now, more about endurance. Yes, storms come. Yes, boats break. Yes, men are lost. But still, they go out again. Still, they cast nets, row oars, brave the waves, because they have to, because without the sea, there is no village. You lie back against the bench staring into the smoky rafters, listening as the final tale winds down. It's about a storm that never came, a dark sky that threatened but passed, leaving calm seas behind. The fisherman telling it smiles, as if to say not every story ends in loss. Still the unease lingers. You close your eyes, the rhythm of the waves echoing in your mind, and wonder, if the sea came calling tonight, would you have the strength to face it? Probably not, but tomorrow the villagers will, storm or no storm. That's what survival looks like here. Morning breaks grey and damp, and you shuffle awake with a fresh set of aches. Your shoulders stiff from rowing, your palms raw from rope burns. But there's no sympathy in a Viking fishing village. The chores wait, and so does the constant shadow of sickness. As you rub your eyes, you realise the itch on your arm from last night hasn't gone away. You scratch absent-mindedly, then notice small bites peppering your skin. Fleas. Congratulations, you're now part of the buffet. The huts are warm but crowded, and where there are people, there are pests. Lice cling to hair, fleas hop through straw, and rats scurry along the edges of storage pits. You catch sight of one now, darting past the fire, whiskers twitching, eyes glinting. Nobody else reacts. They're used to it. You, however, recoil, your stomach flipping at the thought that those little creatures are sharing your sleeping space. Historians still argue whether disease spread faster through Viking trade routes or through their own villages, but either way, you're sitting in the middle of a petri dish disguised as a community. Breakfast is thin gruel again, barley and water, maybe a sliver of fish if you're lucky. You chew mechanically, staring at your hands. The blisters from rowing are already angry and red, the skin peeling. A shallow cut on your thumb burns with every movement. You try to ignore it, but the thought nags at you. Infection. In your world, you'd slap on a bandage and some antiseptic. Here, it's moss or nothing. A small cut could spiral into fever, swelling, or worse. You suddenly understand why average life expectancy wasn't high. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking medical remedies included applying animal dung mixed with herbs onto wounds. Yes, dung. Supposedly it helped keep infection away. You look down at your cut and shudder. No, thank you. You'd rather risk the fever. Still, you can't deny that survival often demanded desperate measures. You pull your sleeve down, hiding the wound, pretending it isn't there. The day's tasks don't wait. You're sent to gather seaweed along the shore, your boots sinking into cold, slimy sand. The wind cuts through your cloak, your joints aching with every step. Arthritis, back pain, constant labour. It was all part of life here. No chiropractors, no ibuprofen, just endurance. The fisherman beside you coughs into his sleeve, a deep rattling sound that makes the others glance his way. Illness here isn't private, it's public, obvious and dangerous. If one person falls, it threatens the whole household. You silently pray you don't catch whatever he has. Mainstream fact, skeletal remains from Viking sites show signs of arthritis, tuberculosis and malnutrition. People endured constant physical strain, poor diets in winter, and exposure to damp conditions. You feel that history in your bones already, after just days here. Your back screams as you lift bundles of kelp, your knees creak as you climb the rocks. You're living a fraction of their struggle, and it's enough to convince you modern medicine is humanity's greatest miracle. As the afternoon wears on, you notice small details that drive the reality home. A child scratches her head constantly, lice thriving in her hair. An elder sits by the fire, rubbing his swollen joints, grimacing. A woman winces as she walks, a deep cut on her foot bound only with a strip of wool. Everyone here carries aches, wounds, or illness, yet no one stops. Work continues. Nets must be mended, fish salted, fires tended. Rest is a luxury illness rarely grants. Historians still debate how much traditional healing knowledge Vikings had. Some sagas mention skilled healers, while others hint that luck and prayers mattered more. Tonight, as you slump against the smoky wall, scratching flea bites and flexing sore joints, you wonder which mattered more, herbs or hope. Either way, you're unprepared for both, and the thought nags you again. Your cut, your cough, your constant fatigue. Here, Even the smallest weakness can snowball. You swallow hard, realizing survival isn't just about storms or hunger. It's about enduring the slow grind of disease, dirt, and daily aches that never, ever let go. Night closes in once more, the sky stretching dark and endless above the fjord. The village quiets, though not completely. There's always the sound of the sea, the creak of wood, the occasional bleat of livestock. You shuffle back toward the hut, dragging your tired body across the damp ground. Every muscle aches, every joint protests, but the worst isn't the pain. It's the knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Inside, the smoky air wraps around you again, heavy and stale. The hearth glows faintly, embers whispering heat. But it's not enough to chase away the damp. Families settle onto their straw beds, shoulders brushing, bodies huddled for warmth. You find your corner, the same lumpy mattress that poked you awake last night. You lower yourself carefully, praying the fleas are too tired to bother with you tonight. Spoiler. They're not. Already, you feel tiny legs scuttling across your skin. You sigh, resigning yourself to the midnight feast, where you're the main course. The darkness is thick, broken only by the faint glow of the fire. Smoke curls low, clinging to your throat, making each breath scratchy. The smell of fish still lingers everywhere, in your hair, in the straw, in the very air you breathe. You close your eyes, but the day replays itself behind your lids. The endless rowing, the heaving nets, the slap of cod against your chest, the bartering fiasco with the sheep. Even in rest, you're haunted by fish. Maybe this is what eternity smells like in a Viking village. A man nearby snores, loud and ragged, vibrating the walls. A child whimpers in her sleep. Someone coughs, deep and wet, and you shiver. Not from cold, but from dread. Illness doesn't sleep, and in a house this crowded, it spreads like fire through dry straw. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to bury yourself in the rough wool, but the draught sneaks in anyway. The night feels endless, stretching on, broken only by the occasional crackle of the hearth. You think of your warm bed back home, your clean sheets, your silence. Here, sleep is a battlefield you rarely win. Mainstream fact. Sagas mention that winter nights in the north could feel eternal, with darkness lasting up to 20 hours. Villagers pass the time with stories, chores by firelight, and restless sleep. Historians still argue whether people adjusted by sleeping in shifts, or simply endured the endless dark. Tonight, you're just trying to last 1 hour without scratching another flea bite. A quirky tidbit. Some Viking families carved protective runes onto their bed frames or hut beams, believing the symbols could guard their sleep from bad dreams or spirits. You glance up at the smoky rafters and almost wish you had one etched above your straw pile. Maybe then you'd rest easier. Instead, you get the comfort of creaking timbers and the faint scuttle of a rat across the floor. The fire burns lower, shadows stretch longer. Your eyelids grow heavy, though the noise and the itch fight against rest. You drift in and out, caught between wakefulness and uneasy dreams. When you do slip under, it's no better. Your mind conjures waves swallowing boats, storms tearing nets, fish flopping endlessly in the dark. You wake with a start, heart racing, only to realize the night is far from over. You sink back into the straw, resigned. In this place, even sleep isn't safe. It's just another chore. And now, as the long day in the Viking fishing village closes, the pace softens. The sound of oars and nets fades, replaced by the steady hush of waves against the shore. The smoky hearth dims, its glow no longer harsh but gentle, like embers breathing their last warmth into the air. The smells of fish, smoke, and earth blur into the background, no longer sharp, just faint traces that settle like whispers on the wind. You picture yourself lying back in that rough straw bed, the heaviness of your limbs too great to fight. The noises of the hall, snores, coughs, the restless shifting of bodies, become distant, muffled, as though wrapped in layers of wool. Even the scratching of fleas becomes less urgent, less real, fading with each slow, measured breath you take. Outside, the sea moves endlessly, but its roar has softened into a lullaby. The long dark stretches on, but it no longer presses heavy against you. Instead, it folds around you like a blanket, deep and quiet, reminding you that this world turns whether you row or not, whether you labour or rest. The storms will come and go, the nets will fill or break, but for now, none of that matters. You let your breathing slow, matching the rhythm of the tide. In, out, in, out. Each breath heavier, each exhale longer, your body surrendering to rest. The Viking village hums on around you, but you've slipped away from its demands. You've earned this moment of stillness, this surrender to the dark. And with the waves still lapping gently against the shore, you finally drift, quiet, weightless, into sleep. Sweet dreams.